Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us in 2025. And then today we're having, a very great speaker that we had years back, and I'm really happy to have her here today. And I don't know how, but the theme for this year is situational leadership, and she's going to be discussing through her book, the subject of leading your organization towards exponential impact. So we're going to give her the mic now to speak, and that's it. Welcome up.
Awesome. Thank you, Miracle, for giving me the opportunity to speak about something I always love speaking about. So, just a quick background on myself for anyone who may not know about me. My name is Aurora. I grew up in the southern United States. I've lived in various places around the United States. I have done some international work, but I will just go ahead and say that largely my conversation is from a US perspective, but I think it's really important to understand that largely my conversation is from a human perspective. Yes, culture comes into play in these things, but we're all humans and we have certain human tendencies at the end of the day. So that's where I'm coming from when I talk about these things. I have a 35, well, I've been saying 35 years for a while. It's probably close to 40 years, almost a little between 35 and 40-year career spanning many industries. I've worked in retail, financial services, higher education, hospitality. I have worked in many different kinds of functions. I've worked in large organizations. I've worked in small startups. I've worked in, with nonprofits and social enterprises. So I have really kind of a wide variety of experience. And that's really important because I like to cross pollinate those ideas as I go from one place to another, I draw from all of that. 8 years ago, I decided to start my own company and focus exclusively on sustainability. That is both environmental and social impact. I work largely within the hospitality industry, so most of my clients are hotels, convention centers, event planners, destination management organizations, travel management organizations. But the work I do ultimately is about change management. And so, to that end, I recently published a book, Exponential Impact. It's harnessing human potential to drive sustainability in organizations. It's not specific to any particular industry. Yes, a lot of the examples in there are from hospitality because that's my main field, but a lot of this applies to a lot of different kinds of organizations because um, we're humans. And we struggle with similar things. And so, this concept of situational leadership, what's really important to think about when we think about the situation, right? Situational leadership is what's the situation. And in this book, I cover 4 leadership principles or engagement principles, and they are empathize, enlighten, empower, and encourage. And the very first one, empathize, that is situational leadership because that is about who are you even trying to lead? Whose mind are you trying to change? What language are you trying to speak? Not international languages, but are you speaking the language of finance? Are you speaking the language of marketing? Are you speaking the language of entry level people? Are you speaking the language of the C-suite? And so first off, I think it's very important to understand the language and the perspective of the people you're working with and that you're trying to convince. And this is especially important for those who want to drive social impact or environmental impact. Why? Because we tend to come at the world with a lot of fervor and angst, and we are absolutely sure that what we want to do is the right thing to do. It's almost like a religious type of experience. It's visceral for us. And so it's hard sometimes for us to understand, why don't other people want what I want? And, for example, in the United States, a couple of months ago, we had a major, experience of this, a lot of us, because we couldn't believe that most of our country elected a person that we think, what, why would this be acceptable, right? But this is the world we live in. And so what we have to do at an organizational level is understand that when we come at people with all of this intensity, and we are demanding that we're right and we're emphatic and all those things, and those are important, that passion is really important for convincing people to change their ways. But the instant reaction is generally going to be like, oh, no, no, no. Yeah, I don't have time for that. You're turning me off. It's too much. And so those of us in social and environmental causes have tended to push away the very audiences that we need to embrace and bring in. So my whole approach is about approachability, right? Because if our approach isn't approachable, well, then who's going to sit down and talk to you? Who's going to, who's going to even give you the time of day, much less think about how their actions might contribute to this challenge or this problem, much less how they might be part of the solution. So empathize, the whole section around empathize is all about addressing specific types of stakeholders within an organization, within your workplace. And it starts with yourself. The very first chapter in that first section is, do you understand your own perspective? Do you understand the situation you came from? The fact that I grew up in the southern United States and I was surrounded by a sort of a culture that I didn't really fit with and didn't agree with in terms of just certain philosophies. And that informed who I became and how I traveled around and worked in different industries. All of that informed who I am as a person. If you've ever taken like self-assessment tests, like StrengthsFinder or Myers-Briggs or any of those, that's also part of who you are, because we're all designed and made up differently. So just even starting with, what is my situation? Because it helps you understand that like we're not all the same, right? And when we're upset that we can't convince people to do the things we want to do, when we can't lead them, it's because a lot of times we come in assuming that we're all the same, right? And we are not. And so learning yourself and really kind of questioning, like, how did I come to this place where this is what I want to do, and how might I come across to people? And so for myself, when I started my business, I made a conscious choice to try to show up differently. That's not easy, because my natural tendency is to be like, like really be very intense and very assertive or even aggressive. But I had to learn to really tone down some of what I was saying and really reframe it with some humor, and reframe it with some practicality. And so that's a very important part of what you need to be thinking about, is who is your audience. And within an organization, you're, depending on what level you are, but most likely a lot of the people listening to this, you're going to have to manage up and manage down and around, right? There's going to be people like under you in the organization, potentially, not under as in less than, but just, that's the way charts look, right? There's the people around you, your peers in other departments. And of course, there's the leaders of the organization who, by the nature of what they're paid to do, they have a fiduciary responsibility to focus on profits ahead of everything else. Obviously, a lot of us believe that it's not an either or, it's a both and. You can focus on profits and do great things in the world and do less harm, or no harm, ideally. And so understanding what is driving the decisions of those people, and focusing your message and your efforts with each of these audiences specific to what drives them. And sometimes what that means is you might have this, like, let's say this is sort of the diagram of all the things you want to change and do. You may have to strip it down to just like this and focus on winning that one thing, or that small number of things. Get those small wins. In sustainability, I do a lot of presentations with event planners, so like trade show planners, conference planners, and there's a lot of things they can do for sustainability. I mean, a long list, everything from how people get to the conference, the ground transportation once they're at the conference, the signage and materials and paper and badges and all the things like that, the food they serve, everything, right? And it's overwhelming. And so I do a lot of conversations with them about food and beverage specifically. And even within that, there's a long list of all the things they could do. And so I'll be talking to them and they'll say, well, I'm never going to get our executive to stop ordering steak. And I said, well, then let him keep ordering steak. Why don't you work on the things you know you can win? Why don't you work on bread? Bread is a very, very wasteful thing. Yes, it's not as bad as steak, but let them eat their steak. You fix bread, you fix fruit, you fix some of these other things. And then 2 or 3 years from now, you will have developed trust with your stakeholders. They will see the changes you're making and the impact it has. Ideally, it will lower your cost. You will be more confident and you will get to a day when you can argue about steak. But don't try to do the thing. Don't assume that I want you to go after the hardest thing. That's like saying, like, I want you to reach the top of this mountain without first climbing it, right? And so it's really just about like you have to climb the hill. And so as you're thinking about trying to lead an organization in a direction, you have a vision for this, but you have a lot of little steps that you have to take. And so allow yourself and allow others to take those small steps. And the empathize piece of this is listening, conversations and dialogue, surveys, research, things like that, that you need to understand. What is the situation? If I'm to do situational leadership, what is the situation? Pertinent to the change I'm trying to drive. And then after that is enlighten, which also has a situational element. So enlighten is, all right, now I've heard you. I understand kind of what you need and what might resonate with you. So now I need to deliver some messages. I need to educate you, inform you, and maybe even equip you with knowledge to change the way you do your job, right? So at the very least, I need to kind of give you the why, right? Why is this important? Well, here are some facts, or here's a story of who's impacted, right? And I find that a lot of times the why that has been used in the world of sustainability is really like blame and shame. And it's, the earth is burning and the sky is falling. And yes, the earth is burning and the sky is falling, but people don't want to, if that's the message we're leading with, most people will shut it out. Now, there is a time and a place for being in people's faces and giving them the hard message. That there is a time and place when that needs to happen, especially when you're dealing with government leaders. But I am mostly dealing with organizations. I'm dealing with everybody from the ground level person who's cleaning the bathrooms or working as a line cook, all the way up to the general managers, the vice presidents, the CEOs. Those people, right, mostly are going to respond better if the why that you give them resonates. So one of the things that I've done when I go into convention centers and do training on food waste, so rather than just coming in and saying like, you must compost, you must donate excess food, and that's it, here's the technical thing, I show slides giving them the hunger rate of the city that they live in. Here's the food insecurity picture of this city. And a lot of times, because I'm training dishwashers and servers and line cooks and things like that in a convention center, they live in the neighborhoods that are hardest hit by food insecurity. And they've never connected like, oh, if I were to do my job differently here and preserve food that we could donate, that could impact my community. Oh, I remember seeing a truck in my community delivering food to that family over there. Oh, I didn't even realize that my company can donate to that. Then all of a sudden, that person, rather than just being given a task to do, they're given a reason to be excited about their job. And I believe that everyone, I don't care if you're a dishwasher or a CEO, everyone, whoops, Are you there? Okay, sorry, it looks like it reconnected. Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes, I
you
can.
can.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Suddenly it blipped there. Sorry about that. So yeah, so I believe everyone should be able to experience dignity in their work, right? Whether you're a dishwasher or a CEO, everyone deserves to feel dignity, and we treat lower levels of organizations with this mentality of because I said so. I don't know if that's a phrase that translates for your audience, but it's a phrase that's used in the United States by a lot of parents when they don't want to have to explain to their children why they have to do the thing. They said, because I said so. Well, why do I have to do this? Because I said so. And that's the way we tend to treat people in a corporate environment. Do this because I said so. Well, people, when they understand why you want them to do this thing, there's a greater level of trust. There's a humanity to that. That you're tapping into people's heartbeats and emotions, and people shouldn't be expected to just leave their personalities at the door or leave their hearts at the door. They should be able to engage on all levels when they're inside of an organization, working in an organization. So the enlighten phase of your leadership strategy should be a well-designed communication plan so that all of those stakeholders that you've sort of figured out their situations, what is it? What are the messages they need to hear? How and where do they need to hear it? Because here's the other thing. When you're delivering messages, when you're trying to convince people, right? You're basically a salesperson. You're in the job of sales and marketing, and your product is a social or environmental initiative. So you need to sell it. And you need to think about basic marketing principles. And basic marketing principles will tell you, you have to constantly be putting a brand in front of people. You have to send messages about a product. I think this research shows like 7 or 11 times for people to really remember and act on things. The same should be said for these kinds of initiatives, that you should be treating them as if you're trying to sell something inside of an organization. Using interesting design, using appealing words, repeating the message, keeping it brief. That's one I've had to really get better at. Keeping the message just one little thing at a time so people can digest it and act on it. Then after you've enlightened the organization, empower, that's really where the leadership comes in, right? Because if you've really done all of this right and you're really leading an organization towards impact, empowerment is where the work happens, right? So you can listen to everybody and learn all about what they need, what they're thinking. You can deliver the message and get them excited and yes, we're on board. But if you haven't enabled them to access the tools and the resources they need to do the job, if you haven't empowered them to make decisions, if you haven't empowered them to solve problems, if you haven't empowered them, then you've kind of wasted your time, right? And unfortunately, a lot of organizations will, they'll maybe do some listening exercises. They spend a lot of time trying to, educate and roll out and have newsletters, and they roll out initiatives with communication. But then the people who are supposed to do the work are like, for me to do the thing that you wanted me to do, this equipment that I use every day, it doesn't do the thing that you're saying. Like, that's not a good thing, right? And a lot of times there's like this disconnect in the design of these ideas, and we just forget about basic practicality, right? We forget about the infrastructure of the city the area we live in. So when it comes to what a lot of the work I do, a lot of that is related to waste management. And I can do one thing when I work with clients in Chicago, and I have to do a different thing when I work with clients in Miami because the infrastructure is very different. In Chicago, they've got a waste partner who can take almost any kind of material you send. In Miami, there's very little that they can actually recycle because of the poor infrastructure in Miami. And so just even understanding like what is that empowerment has to be designed and taken in, you have to take into account all of these different elements and factors, right, that enable someone to realistically do their job. And I think that empowerment, so the way I write about empowerment in this organization, in this book, is it's sort of like a a progression of maturity for organizations. And what I tend to see is sustainability, especially in smaller organizations, right? In global corporations, it's much more advanced, but in smaller startups, medium-sized companies, um, generally what happens is there'll be some person who's super passionate about this. Their job might be something in operations, they might be in marketing, and they take it upon themselves to start something in the organization. Maybe they set up a recycling program in the lunchroom, or maybe they decide to launch a green team or a task force of some sort. So they go around and talk about others and they start kind of doing stuff. Even though it's not technically their job, they just start making little things happen because they're super passionate about it. And it's usually small little things like convincing their coworkers to stop throwing the recyclable items in the trash. Little things, and they build and they build and they build on that, and they become known as like the green person, or the whatever, like they might be um, seen as in the organization. But people start to notice, and these sort of self-proclaimed champions, eventually, in a lot of cases of the people that I know, eventually they get the attention of those higher and higher up in the organization, and they start to think, well, this is really a thing you're doing, and our clients actually are interested in this. So let's talk more about what's going on here. And then it starts to get formalized a little bit. And then there's the other situation I see that's kind of parallel to that is a company might be wanting to start dabbling in some of these things, or they might want to try to take it a little bit to the next level, but they don't necessarily have a formal department or a lot of people that are formally tasked in terms of their job description and how they're paid and such to do this. Well, I know a lot of younger people, younger professionals who, for whatever reason, maybe the way they were raised, maybe just their personality style, for whatever reason, they really want to be involved in work like this, but they're just sitting around waiting for somebody to come and pick them. They're not the ones that are going to raise their hand and go step out boldly and take a risk like that. They have a lot to offer and they really want to be involved in this. But the vast majority of them think, I've got to go back to school to get an environmental degree or get a social, some kind of social services degree or something. Um, and I'm going to have to go get a job somewhere else. They always think that like it's out there somewhere else, and it almost feels unreachable, especially if they don't want to have the expense and the time of going back for more degrees. And I think that's really sad because I think the sustainability should be woven through the entire organization in every department. And so if those people were given just a spark of encouragement to just step out and take a little bit of a risk, if a company, if organizations had ways of identifying where is the sort of latent talent that real people in this organization really want to work on this. They're really interested, but that's not their job and we don't even know who they are. How do you find out? Well, who are those people that are just sitting around waiting? They're job hunting, trying to find a better organization to work with. Just because someone hasn't come along and asked the question, who in here would like to work on a volunteer activity for the company to do? Simple things. Who would like to organize an outing where we go and work at the homeless shelter for the weekend? Right? And if you put it out there like that and show people in the organization, this is something we want. We just don't have the top level leaders, we don't have time to work on it. But if you wanted to work on it, then let's make it happen. And so if we could activate those, if we can activate those sort of hidden champions, what's important about that is not only would we reach goals around impact, you start to really change culture, right? Like all of these things that I'm talking about start to really shift culture, because culture is hinges on better communication, trust, cross-functional conversations, right? All of those things make a better culture. And so when people start to see like, oh, there's these opportunities for me to potentially experiment and grow, they're going to feel more loyalty. They're going to feel better about their employer, better about their peers at work. And so that's what empowerment looks like in the earlier stages of these things within businesses, right? And then eventually it becomes a more formal, like, oh, well, we have a department, there's an official strategy, there's some budget, we have some job descriptions, this is what some people actually do. And then ultimately, we're looking for scenarios where this is just the embodiment of the organization. There's not a lot of organizations out there in the world, like companies, that is, for profit businesses, that truly have it in their DNA. But you see that more and more, and there definitely are examples. The last section of the book is encourage. It's a really short section. And really, what that's about is the fact that all these people doing this work, that is you, those of you on this call, right? You're probably listening this because you're a person who wants to drive impact. You want to be that change agent. And what I mean by encourage is that you need encouragement. You need support. You need to take care of your health. You need to reach out and connect with others when you feel this is lonely, difficult work. A lot of times, a lot of people who do this, they feel this is lonely, difficult work. And the people who are so busy taking care of the planet aren't taking care of themselves sometimes. And so to really be encouraged, for you to be encouraged and for you to encourage others you're bringing into this work, just remember, people still need sleep. They still need good diet and health and movement, and to breathe fresh air, and to meditate, and to have community, and to be paid. Honestly, right? Like we pay the people for the work they're doing. Like we need to make sure that people have all of the encouragement that people need to be able to do a job that, quite frankly, some days is thankless and challenging. So I think I've probably gone on maybe a little bit more than the time, but hopefully that helped.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Dawn. I'm really grateful for this. And I think this section really resonates with a situation which I recently experienced with a friend of mine. And it's an hotel. It's an hotel. So I was going to tell you, it's an hotel. And the boss told some of the staff, okay, the boss sacked some of the staff and told the staffs that were there that, hey, you would have to like do a 24-hour shift. So, I mean, so you do 24 hours, the next day, the other person does 24 hours. So, I mean, it's 24 hours. So, I mean, so that I spoke to and I asked that, was this stated in the employment letter that this is what you're meant to do? He said, oh, no. And the boss said, oh, sorry, I can't pay you for I can't pay you extra because I wrote in this employment letter that if I can decide to tell you to do extra and I won't pay you for extra workload. I mean, that's about 12 extra hours working and you don't get paid for it. The boss said that. And I was shocked. I'm like, wow, this is really wrong. And he said, oh no, that's my policy. That's the company's policy. And I was shocked, like, wow. So do we have companies like that that create policies like this? I was shocked, and she was really pained. She was really pained. So I told her, hey, you have to resign. I know you need a job. I know you need a job, but you just have to resign. This is not healthy for you. And couple the fact that they're not even willing to compensate you for the fact that you're spending an extra 12 hours working. She said, okay, okay. She did that. So now the question is this. Now, companies that create policies like this, how do staffs manage bosses that actually act this way?
Yeah, I will say, I a lot of what I'm saying is not easy stuff to do. I'm sitting here saying these things, and these things don't happen overnight. These are not easy conversations. And in some cases, some organizations and some people are just bad. They just at the core, they do not have the capacity. They're sociopaths. They're narcissistic. They're assholes, pardon the wording, but they literally are, right? And that and there's you're not going to be you know what, I'll tell you the way I put it. I say this in my book, and I want you to think about this statement. You can't wake a person pretending to sleep. You can't wake a person pretending to sleep. So all these things you're doing to try to wake people up to see a new thing, if they're truly asleep and you wake them up, they're going to see, oh, okay, now I'm awake. But if a person's pretending to sleep, meaning a lot of times these companies will say good things and you go and read their mission statements and we're all about this. And, you know, especially the hospitality industry, it's like, oh, these are great places to work. And they're usually just, right? They're pretending to sleep. They don't want to be woken up. They're not listening to you. It doesn't matter. Anything you say is not going to resonate. So I advocate for exactly what you advocated for. Anyone who is listening to this conversation is worthy of going somewhere else. And I know we live in a world where bills have to be paid and things like that, but I think it starts with everyone understanding your basic worth as a human being and as an educated professional, especially if you're talking to people who are educated professionals. But even if you're not, don't have high levels of education, it, I just, I mean, I know that I don't want to come across like I'm unrealistic. I know the world we live in, and I know sometimes it saddens me that that's sometimes the reality. And that's why sometimes the answer is walkouts and strikes and things like that. You know, at a more global level, entire industries or entire companies have to say enough is enough, right? At an individual level, like your friend, I commend you for advising this person to leave and go somewhere else. Find a place where your talents are going to be nurtured. Here's what's so frustrating. I don't I have a hard time understanding why people don't grasp that if you treat people well and pay people well and do a lot of these things that we're talking about, the productivity, the efficiency, the differentiations in your products and your services, the culture, all the things that make businesses be successful germinate out of the kinds of things we're talking about. Social and environmental impacts spawn greater efficiency and productivity. They spawn greater innovation. So any organization that's trying to tamp that down, my wish for them is they fail. My wish is that ultimately their customers would see them as terrible businesses. They will lose business and they will degrade and degrade and degrade and degrade, because that is what they have decided is their fate by being that way. By creating a culture that dehumanizes and devalues people, that's going to spill over into how they treat their customers, right? And so I would hope that, now that could be a one-off person with just this one-off thing with this one person. And my hope is that he eventually gets fired, that he eventually, his department and who he oversees, the productivity levels, the culture, the, turnover rate, turnover. So in the United States, I actually quote a study in the book. In the United States, there's research that shows that the average cost per employee to for hiring and onboarding everything is $4,700. And some people say that it should be three times, that it's really three times that amount. So that means when you don't treat a person well and you're not encouraging them in their job and they leave, you're looking at least $15,000, most likely. I mean, depending, we're talking about what kind of job, right? I mean, if it's a dishwasher, not so much, but if it's like a marketing manager or, a staff supervisor or something, you're looking at $5,000+, and it could be more and more, to replace that person. And unfortunately, the math to equate attitude and behaviors and leadership with that turnover is not happening in a lot of organizations. Advanced organizations with a lot of focus on culture, they're doing that math. They're figuring out that when we invest in education, listening sessions, all these culture improvement things, our our retention rates go up. We keep our employees longer, right? The attrition goes down. Our employee satisfaction surveys go up. And there's correlations between employee satisfaction and productivity, profitability, all of those things. So the fact that some businesses have been able to get away and exploit people despite these sort of fundamental truths is sad to me. But yes, there are still industries, and of course, in a lot of the world and in certain industries, this actually ends up coming right down to enslaved labor. These are people whose freedoms and choices have been completely removed when you get down to like people who work in mining, people who work in agriculture, right? Those industries, particularly fishing, a lot of those industries have astonishing rates of enslaved or forced labor or really poor labor practices and just lots of human rights violations, right? And so, that's the extreme version of this, but that's where it leads when we allow that kind of mentality to take root and overtake a company and a location, an industry.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful. Honestly speaking, while I was speaking to her, and I could, and while you were talking, I could feel the way, how you were speaking was the way I was speaking to her as well, too. And I think it's really bad that how we have organizations that have grown to a certain level and then, somehow dehumanizes, human dignity in how they pay, even in how they treat their staffs. And I want to say thank you so much for this. And we've come to the end of this section, but before we let you go, want to ask for your advice. Give it's. I think it was about 2 years we held the section with you. So now,
Mhm.
so far in your journey so far with different docents you worked with, what advice would you give to younger generations and then people as a whole generally?
So for younger generations, I think, again, going back to that concept of being a champion, right? Think of yourself as a champion of the cause that you're trying to drive in the world, assuming that your cause is good and benevolent, right? Assuming that you're trying to do something positive, right? Um, so I would say, if you are a person who is willing to take risk and step out boldly, then just do it today. Just make those steps today. Be willing to take small steps. Be okay with small steps. You probably have some grand vision, but be okay with really small things, because before you know it, you'll be able to look back and marvel at what you've been able to do. For those of you who are kind of like in a situation where you might feel like you're sort of waiting for something, you're waiting for that trigger, that moment, that catalyst to get you into action. Stop waiting for that. You are that catalyst. It is inside of you. Yes, you might need some additional education. You might need, permission and such. But there are steps that you can take as your own catalyst, not waiting for permission. And especially I say this to women or anyone who has maybe because of their culture and upbringing been always made to feel you need to wait. Even I, as a white person in America, but as a woman, I was in my mid 40s when I realized I was waiting on permission to do the thing I wanted most in my life to do. And when I had that wake up call, I was like, what? Who am I? It's just like, no, you have the power to do this. I can't believe it took me so long to really, and I spent my life going after all my dreams. But the one thing that I most wanted to do, I was not ready to go into that because I realized I was waiting for somebody else to invite me and offer me a job in that. And I was like, no, I'm going in and getting it myself. And so I would encourage you to have that mentality of you're the champion of your cause, Um, Lower your expectations of what that means and allow small steps, right? Because, I know it's cliche and the saying, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, but it's true. If you want to be in your 50s like me and be able to list all the things you've accomplished and be working in a career that offers so much gratification, I didn't just, I went through a lot of years. I went through a lot in my life to get to where I am. Not all of it easy to get to where I am. So just start those steps as soon as you're able.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. I'm really, really grateful. Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's also joined us. And um, let me just say two things I took. It said everyone's job should experience some form of dignity, irrespective of the job. And then you can't wake a person who is pretending to sleep. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much. And everyone who's joined us, thank you so, so much. So we're going to let Doctor leave now.
Thank
And I hope
you.
to see her some other time. I'm probably going to have a physical section one day. And yeah, thank you so much, Mom.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miracle, and for everybody who listened.
Same. Okay, everyone,
Okay.
thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Bye.